All right, thank you, everybody. I'm glad you've been having a good lunch break, tea break, dinner break, whatever you call it. So, values added. Values added was the idea of Professor Richard Vincent and Dr. Hugh Morgan, both experienced prime tutors from the start of prime in the 1990s, using their own and other prime tutors' material. It was designed for Christian junior doctors in the first 3 years after graduation, but it's been gradually expanded in content and widened to include other healthcare professionals, HCPs for short. But the diversity of HCPs still needs to grow wider and deeper. I use values added to help newly graduating HCPs, mainly in the first year after graduation. But wise HCPs who have benefited in their first year come along to share experiences so as to encourage the new first year juniors. I first started using values added in 2013, and God has enabled it to grow and flourish over the years since then. And God has also enabled me to adapt and to add to the content from other sources. It is more overtly Christian because it's aimed at Christian HCPs, whereas in a non-Christian setting, Prime needs to find ways to apply Christian principles to encourage holistic healthcare. As Christians, of course, we value and treat the patient with kindness and respect, valuing their dignity, because they are each made in the image of God. But why should those with non-Christian belief systems value a patient in that way? That is one of the challenges of working with Prime, changing hearts and minds and thus motives. So these are the aims of values added. There's an explanation of what these points mean in practice on the handout, which the team can give you at the end of the session or send you after the conference. As I said, values added was face-to-face from 2013, but in 2020, COVID changed it to online. However, in God's design, that had the result of reaching a wider geographic audience. The values added course starts with an introductory module of 2 sessions. The big picture sets the scene, and Kingdom Values reminds us who we are working for and what he can do if we are prepared to join with him. There are 6 modules, as you can see on the slide, and there are 35 sessions overall. And you've all seen this already. Prime teaches whole person care throughout the world. So we aim to be learner-centered and use a range of teaching styles. So we model what we preach, and that applies to the junior HCPs too, as we do the VA course. In many areas of the world, teaching is purely didactic. Prime uses some didactic, like you're experiencing now, but also large group work, but that's a bit harder on Zoom when everybody's muted, and also when you can't pick up body language clues easily. Then we do small group work, breakout rooms, which work really well on Zoom, and role play, including goldfish bowl role play, so as to engage all those observing in the decision-making and direction of the observed consultation. So we're now going to ask you to do some parts of the sessions which are about the values and whole person care, so you can see things from the perspective of junior HCPs about how things like values and whole person care all tie together, and which therefore allows the newly graduated HCPs to think through and apply their values. So talking of values, you'll recall you saw this in Andy Charlie's session earlier today. The aim was to identify the values, personal attributes, and characteristics that are universally valued by all HCPs. And this is what the combined list from many values added groups over a number of years when they did this exercise. As you'll have heard, the really interesting thing is that when Prime do this exercise around the world, even in atheist cultures or those with other faiths, the values of a good HCP produces the same list. You'll notice on this list, I've grouped similar words together. More values from the many values added groups. I'm always fascinated that knowledge comes up 99 times, but wise just twice. Wisdom, of course, is applying knowledge. Just remember, knowledge, tomato is a fruit, not a vegetable. Wisdom, knowing not to add it to your fruit salad. And these are some of the more of the values added topics. The content is based on Prime's teaching abroad, but has been adapted to some degree to bring it into more Christian aspects. So some things are taught at university, like asking the patient about their ideas, concerns, and expectations. But these go lost in the busy day-to-day life of young junior HCPs, especially junior doctors with time pressures and understaffing. In fact, within weeks of graduating, they might just about ask about expectations, but ideas and concerns, no. You saw this list, and hopefully you heard that if you decided to look at all the Bible passages here, it would take you 2.5 hours. And Andy put you into pairs or small groups to look at just this one miracle of Jesus, who is fully God and also fully human. Andy's slide, sensibly, was much less busy than the one I use. He was seeking the human qualities, the values, personal attributes, and characteristics that Jesus displays in his interactions with people in this particular account of a healing miracle. And you shared your answers, which will hopefully look something like this list, maybe with a few more. And when you look at all those Bible passages, you get a much longer list. And then you discover the values, in particular those highlighted in red, are the values expected of a good healthcare professional. And these are more of the characteristics shown by Jesus. The values of a good HCP are those seen in Jesus because they are God's values. Because we are all made in the image of God, it explains why the list for a good HCP is the same in all cultures. This is a real revelation to the juniors. So, your turn to do some work in your pairs or small groups. I hope you're ready to move into those. What makes a good middle grade healthcare practitioner? So think of someone who was involved in your teaching or training in the first few years of your career. This exercise is to help you think about life from a different perspective, not so much what the system expects of us, but what colleagues expect of us. So discuss in pairs or small groups for 5 minutes, or if you're joining online, Richard and Owen, I'm not sure how you're going to do that, but come up with as many as you can. Yes, we can. Compassionate, caring, knowledgeable. But wisdom isn't in there. Ooh.
They're only allowed 3.
I know. That's excellent. Thank you very much. Right. So well done, everybody. So, as I said originally, I was going to do it by large group feedback, but Patrina has very kindly taken me into the high-tech way of doing it with the Mentimeter. So thank you, Patrina, for moving me into the digital age. So the question is, how does your list compare with what actual juniors in their first few years seek in the middle grade HCP nowadays? And this is the list. You can see it's a little bit different from yours. Knowledge is in there, but not compassion, because that's what we're looking for with patients. What they need is somebody who is available, who is approachable. So it's a slightly different list. Remember, these are mostly junior doctors, and this is about their registrar or an SHO if they're in their first year after graduating. So it's a bit different from the list of a good healthcare professional. But what about when you compare it with the values and characteristics and personal attributes seen in Jesus in the healing miracles that you found? Well, it's interesting because most of those are covered by Jesus, except maybe those 2 in red, keen to learn himself and easy to contact. Jesus knew people's hearts and was usually easy to contact, but sometimes the disciples couldn't find him. He'd gone off to a lonely place to pray, for example. Now, of course, he's only a prayer away for us. So back to the Values Added course. These are some more of the topics in Prime's Values Added course. Some sessions have a stronger Christian element. So let's quickly look at the second topic on this list, highlighted in red, as we apply the values we've just explored. It is important because Jesus came to empty the graveyards, not the hospitals. You'll probably be all aware of what I'm going to say now, but for newly graduated junior HCPs, it's something quite new as it's not being covered in their secular training. So I'll just let you read this slide. As Christian healthcare professionals, we need to think about what sort of spiritual care we could give. But it raises the question of, how would you spot if there was a spiritual issue? The answer is to look for spiritual symptoms, of course. These are some spiritual symptoms. Others could be unforgiveness, loss of wonder, disconnectedness from God or from other people. And this list, based on the fruit of the Holy Spirit, is in the opening session of Values Added, the big picture. The list of symptoms is the direct opposite of the fruit of the Spirit, but also look in Galatians 5:19-21 for the desires of the sinful nature, which also includes idolatry, which we know is anything in life that is more important than God, because even a good thing, like being a healthcare practitioner, can become an ultimate thing and thus an idol. Now, there might be some overlap with the psychological, but the why questions cannot be answered easily by psychiatry or counseling. And also, in my experience, forgiveness does not feature in secular counseling, as coming to terms with and accepting is not the same. Again, asking people about many of these things may be a way into deeper conversations. And once you're aware of what a spiritual symptom is and how they might present, the next step is considering how you might initiate a conversation. So one method is to ask questions, maybe questions based on the spiritual symptoms or around many of the words from the definitions of spirituality. We would have already explored in some way many of the definitions of spirituality in more detail when we do the actual session with the juniors. And these are some of the examples that can be used to open conversations about spiritual things. You, of course, might come up with other phrases which work for you, and that's what we encourage the juniors to do, ones that they're comfortable with. When faced with serious situations, especially towards the end of their lives, people often reflect on whether they have lived a good life or been a good person, hence the last one on the list. But there are things that science and facts cannot explain. For example, hope, fear, love, hate, beauty, envy, honor, weakness, striving, virtue. Science reduces such phenomenon to manageable units, but life is actually complex. The Saline Witness Training Program also suggests a couple of mnemonics to help. One is hope. You'll find out more if you do the course. Another mnemonic from the Saline Witness Training Program, which is explored more in the Saline course, is faith. And it's fine to know the values expected from a good HCP or a good middle grade HCP, but what about our personal values and those of the organization we work for? Time for another breakout group, because remember we were modeling prime teaching. So see if you can come up with some acronyms or mnemonics or a short sentence to summarize your personal values. Maybe you could use your name or another word you'd easily remember as a mnemonic. If you prefer, you can do it for the organization you work for. So well done, everybody. So I'm going to show you some other ones. So the coming up with the acronyms came from this. This is the Practice in Poulton the Fylde, where Ron Rhodes used to work. And they had on their website originally an acronym called HEART: honesty, empathy, accountability, respect, and timeliness. It was their corporate values, and they orientated the service they provided around that easy to remember mnemonic. So a question, do you actually know the corporate values of where you work? If not, worth checking it out. So these are some of the acronyms developed by some of the juniors in the Values Added group over the years. So you've got care, faith, give, empathy. So if you've got a Y in your name like Jenny, you now think, right, what can I do with a Y? That's what they had to think. And then think. Actually, somebody wanted to put compassion in, and it came out as thick. So Ellen, Tasha, Natasha, Dawn, you can see people's names. And they were thinking, what do we do for N? Oh, neighbor loving, noble. People are very creative as they come up with them. This is why it's fun. Some more examples. And also from the early days, somebody was very musical, and that was a Martin Joseph song, Soft Hearts, Tough Minds. And help and praise, which was actually also somebody's name. We've got a lovely Nigerian doctor who's called Praise. His son's called Excellence, and his daughter's called Light. And these are some other values. Chest, think. Chaps was one, because somebody wanted to put sunny in it, fun, and hope. And if there are any good ones that you've done, I'll get Patrina to send them to me. If you're happy, they could then go into this slide, and it'll be appearing on the Prime Hub, which can be accessed by all tutors. So one thing, these are all positive values, but a word of caution. Values are often mere slogans, mutually inconsistent, and can be a means for political tyranny, political correctness, values-based recruitment, or you only get the job if your life reflects the management's worldview. So it's no surprise that the notion of values was first made prominent by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who considered them to be a power play in order to control people. It's a bit extreme, but it's a helpful insight into the dark side of values. We need to be constantly vigilant to the fallenness of these values. So we need to be godly and have godly caution, without which we are as innocent as doves, but not as shrewd as vipers. So in a nutshell, it's remembering that these things matter as much, if not more, than technical skills. And a variation for breakout routes, which obviously we haven't got time for, is looking at sharing good role models that you've seen or experienced and people who have inspired them or made a lasting impression. And that's really good when people go into breakout rooms, talk about it for 5 minutes, and then come back and share with the group. So implementation, personally, professionally, and organizationally. As Christians, the Holy Spirit is living and active, making us more like Jesus and producing in us the fruit of the Spirit. So our devotional lives will have a direct effect on our values and our practice. So these come from the introductory session, as you've already seen on the slide, because Andy showed it. By living the kingdom values, God's values, we proclaim Christ to those around us and building a foundation for dialogue with patients and colleagues. Are these our sorts of values? And all values added sessions end with learning actions by which we review at the start of the following session. Because of shift work, I've learned to ask about the last 5 sessions because that usually covers something that somebody's been to. But often they need a hint to remember at the start. And then I summarize the key points of the learning actions from the last 5 sessions. So this is a good place to finish. And these are your learning actions. And maybe you could discuss them the next time you meet, whether it's by Zoom or face-to-face. So that's a quick run through of values added, illustrating a part of how Prime teach, role play and large group work is easier face-to-face. And if you're interested in knowing more about values added, and the Prime Australia team will be able to give you a handout which shows the 35 values added sessions and also explains the principles of Prime on it. So some sessions build on earlier ones, but most are standalone, which is important because the reality of shift work means people come intermittently. Each PowerPoint also has my script under each slide. So if you're not conversant with the material, it gives you a basis to adapt to your own style. And if you're teaching non-Christian HCPs, you can easily adapt the material to teach Christian principles rather than it being overtly Christian. Remember, if you want to run the whole course, it's a major time commitment. But one Prime tutor in Africa has adapted it to 14 sessions for the key issues for that country. And she's doing it with their healthcare assistants and those doing a basic nursing course. So unfortunately, there is no time for questions, but please tell Petrina at the end of the conference if you've got a good mnemonic and you'd like me to put it on the Prime Hub. Thank you.